It was just one of those stupid 3 a.m. style challenges. The ones that used to make for a creepy read late on a weeknight when you should have been sleeping for school the next day. My friends and I used to joke about actually doing one of them, but we were all too chicken at the time. That all changed, though, the last week of senior year when Jason approached the group with something he found online called the driving game. The rules were simple. The game starts at 3 a.m. on the dot. You can have as many people in the car as will fit, but everyone involved must take part in the ritual or it won't work. You need a bucket, some sand, a little pinch of salt, and blood. The ingredients must be mixed together prior to starting, and after mixing them together, each person must put a small amount of the concoction in their left pocket and get in the car. None of us thought that he was serious about wanting to try it, and we definitely weren't wanting to cut ourselves for such a stupid game. Come on, guys. This is the last time we'll probably have the chance to do something like this. It might sound silly, but how many of these things have we scoffed at before brushing them off because we were all too scared? Let's actually do one. If nothing else, it'll be a funny story to laugh about when we've all got boring jobs and families, Jason pleaded. As dumb as the argument might have been, that was all it took to convince me, Charlie, and Joe to venture out on a Friday night to test fate. We met up around midnight about a week after graduation and went over the plan. We didn't want to roam the streets of our own town, so we picked one about 30 minutes west and made our way there after a quick stop at the convenience store for some snacks and a few drinks. The only other vehicle we saw was a semi-truck that nearly ran us off the road just outside of town as we made our way through the darkness. After arriving at our destination, we chilled at a small park for about 45 minutes before performing the ritual. We each pricked our fingers and added a drop of blood to the aforementioned mixture before grabbing a handful and pocketing it. That part seemed so dumb at the time, but I wasn't going to be the one to chicken out at the last minute. At precisely 3 a.m., we all climbed in the car, and Jason started the engine. It didn't seem to want to turn over at first, but after a couple of cranks, it fired up. Trouble starting the car wouldn't be the oddest part, however. We kept the radio off as we drove, choosing to converse and make jokes about what scary thing might happen to us. But as the car came to life, the sound of a piano came through the speakers. As a man started singing, I immediately recognized the song as one that my grandma used to listen to. It was one she said reminded her of Grandpa, and it was the last thing she heard before taking her last breath as we all huddled around her a few years prior. I looked around the car in shock for just a moment before realizing the sound wasn't just in my head. The others all had confused looks on their faces as well, and Charlie even had a tear on his cheek. Why is there such an old song playing? Did you accidentally tune to an oldie station before we got out? I asked with a nervous chuckle as I looked over at Jason. Old? What do you mean? This is from the early 2000s at the oldest, he replied. No, it came out in 2015. It was one of my mom's favorite songs before she passed away, Joe said. After a little back and forth, we realized we were all hearing different songs. They seemed to be related to some grief that we'd gone through in our lives, and that was the moment we almost stopped the whole thing. If only we'd been able to. Jason said the rules clearly stated that we needed to stay in the vehicle at all times. We were allowed to talk, but we had to pay close attention to what was being said because there was the possibility that one of us could be possessed if we weren't careful. Once the car started moving, it was pivotal that it didn't stop for any reason. We could slow down to moving an inch per hour, but we could not come to a complete stop. There's a few other rules, but I'm not allowed to mention them out loud until they become relevant, Jason said. Why not? What kind of game doesn't provide all the rules up front? Joe asked. Some of them contradict each other and only apply in certain situations. You just gotta trust me and go along with whatever I tell you." And with that, he let his foot off the brake and we started rolling. The first hour or so was extremely boring. We rolled through the streets of the small town at an excruciating pace. Nothing seemed to be off, at least not from what we could tell, and by 4:30 we were all ready to call it quits. Other than the weird experience with the music, which I was starting to discount as nothing more than the group playing a prank on me, nothing of note happened. I was about to tell Jason that we should just go grab some breakfast when Charlie spoke up from the back seat. "Did you see that?" "See what?" Joe asked. "A shadow under that street lamp. Something was there just now," he replied. We all looked out the window at the light that Charlie was pointing at, but whatever had been there was long gone. "It was probably just a stray dog or something." Joe's voice cracked a little as he spoke. "Let's just call it a night." "We tried, but it seems like this was just another letdown," Jason said after a long silence. Joe, Charlie, and I quickly agreed, and Jason made a right back onto the main stretch, headed back east. As the streetlights of the small burg faded in the mirror, we all laughed about how scared the others had been. Looking back on it now, we should have been paying a little closer attention instead of assuming that we were out of the woods. The drive home should have taken us about 45 minutes, tops. We'd been going for about 2 hours when Joe mentioned that it was nearly dawn, asking when we'd be getting back. I was starting to get nervous as well, but a part of me hoped that Jason was just driving slower than it looked like he was, just to mess with us. A few minutes later, lights told us that we were nearing town, but they didn't look like the lights of home. As we emerged from the darkness, we found ourselves back in the little town that we'd left barely 2 hours prior. "Jason, you ass, you turned around somewhere," Charlie said, though he didn't sound too confident in the accusation. "I didn't turn off the main road. You all watched me driving the whole time. When would I have been able to do that?" The odd thing was, we were entering from the west, traveling east. The only way that would have made sense would be if we had made a big circle, but like he said, we hadn't turned off the main state route. Then there was the time. The clock on the dash said it was just after 6 a.m. The sun should have been rising, especially in a cloudless sky, but it still looked like it was in the middle of the night. Slowing down, Jason was about to come to a stop when Joe yelled out, "No! Remember, we can't stop. Keep the car moving." "Relax, I just want to take a minute to figure this out. Maybe I took a fork in the road without realizing it, and maybe the clock is messed up and we started a lot earlier than we thought." There was the slightest tremble in his voice. We were all starting to worry, but the concern grew exponentially when we realized that none of us had cell phone coverage. It wasn't like we were in a dead zone, it was more like they were all searching for a tower that should have been there but couldn't find it. We couldn't load any maps or send any messages. A paper map that Jason kept in the glove compartment didn't provide many answers either, as it didn't show any offshoots or forks that we might have missed. It was like we'd driven into a black hole on the one side of town, emerging back on the other. The closest thing I could think of would be the old Pac-Man maps, where you would go through a tunnel that puts you back on the other side of the map. After a few minutes of arguing, while coasting slowly down the road, Jason made a decision that would backfire in a big way. Charlie was the first to notice. "Jason, what the hell, man? Did you stop completely?" "Yes." He sounded almost disconnected from reality. "You weren't supposed to stop. Shit, what now?" Joe was beginning to hyperventilate. The next few minutes were a blur as Charlie lunged at Jason and the two of them somehow ended up flying out the driver's side door. They were rolling around on the road, throwing punches and yelling when an icy wind started to pick up, blowing in the open door and howling all around the car. I tried to get their attention, but it was useless. The louder I yelled, the louder the wind blew until finally it hit the door just right, slamming it shut. After another minute or so, the sound of scuffling and yelling outside ceased, and the wind stopped, leaving Joe and I in silence. I looked back, expecting to see Joe staring at me or looking out the window, only to see him passed out in the seat. Leaning back, I checked to make sure that he was still breathing, and finding he was alive, went about trying to see anything at all outside the windows. The streetlights helped some, but their illumination seemed to stop at the curb. Wherever Charlie and Jason got to, I couldn't see them anymore. I spent the next couple of hours in silence, debating the next move. I was tempted to start driving again, hoping that moving forward would eventually lead out of this hellscape, but any inclination to do that was killed when the car refused to start. I honked the horn a few times, hoping to get the attention of someone or something that might be able to help, but that didn't do anything except cause Joe to stir. He half woke before muttering something about grades and going back to sleep. I've no idea how much time passed as I sat there in the dark. The clock said it was nearly 8 p.m., but I'd started to mistrust it as I found myself counting several hundred seconds off before a single minute would pass. Regardless, I know it had been a while that I'd just been sitting there, waiting for anything at all to happen. I might have fallen asleep, or maybe I just blacked out for a split second. I felt my head droop, and I snapped it back up just in time to see someone walking in the headlights about 30 feet in front of the car. It wasn't Charlie or Jason, it was someone in a dress. I thought that would be all, but a few minutes later I was surprised to see movement at the very edge of the light cast by the car. As I watched, it became clear that the movement was coming from dozens, maybe even hundreds of people walking slowly into town. Turning around to wake Joe up, I found that he was no longer in the car with me. A feeling of complete dread overwhelmed me, and I found myself climbing into the back seat, trying my best to hide. This notebook was shoved under the driver's seat, and it's been more help than anything else as I watch these people walk by the car. I'd almost describe them as zombies, but they don't look dead so much as they look lost. I don't know where they're going or where they came from, but I'm scared. I think I heard one of them say my name, a whisper outside the window. I hear the sound of metal crunching all around me, and I don't know what to do. A part of me just wants to open up the door and take my chances with whatever is out there, but another part I can't explain keeps telling me to hold on just a little longer. I keep seeing flashes of light outside and hearing Joe's voice calling. Why can't they just leave me alone and let me be at peace?